the Cohasset Planning Board for August 28th, 2024 to order at whatever, 6:32. Alphabetical roll call. Who's here?
Clark Brewer here.
Tom Callahan here.
Amy Glassmeyer here.
Kevin Hine here.
Birgit Schmidt-Becher here.
And Deirdre's coming in now.
Okay, great. Of course, we're joined by Cassandra, our town planner, and town council Carolyn Murray, being rested from her summer travels. All right, so first item tonight, let's get minutes out of the way. We have minutes of August 14th meeting. I have a motion to adopt them unless anybody has any changes to them.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Okay,
Second.
all right, all in favor?
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye.
Kevin Hine, aye.
Birgit
Deirdre
Schmidt-Becher.
Hobbs. Sorry, Bridget. Go ahead.
No, Birgit Schmidt-Becher, aye.
Deirdre Hobbs and I.
Next, Brigitte has thankfully, gratefully volunteered to be our liaison to the Open Space Committee.
Yeah, I had to ask, kind of first. I wasn't quite sure whether, since I'm just, so to say, just an associate and I'm pretty new to the business.
No, that's fine. That
Great.
won't stop you. Actually, you'll get to vote on that committee. So I also note that they're meeting with the select board on Wednesday, the 4th as well, so.
Thank you,
so-
Birgit, for volunteering. I would love to have been there with you or been there. And I appreciate you finding time to do it in addition to your efforts here.
Okay, yep, thank you. I'll do my best. And
Yeah,
I'll,
like I said at the last meeting, that the big thing for them to do right now is to update the open space plan, which is what I was doing the 1 year I was on the open space committee a few years ago. So it's an important thing to do. It's all laid out. There's objectives and goals, like a 7-year plan, and it's really just going over them all and updating them and then bringing in any kind of new initiatives that the board committee
Okay.
wants to bring forward. So that's its most important work this year. I know perhaps in front of the board, select board, you might hear about ideas about purchasing some open space. So anyway, so
and then I have to report back to you, correct? Yeah.
yeah.
This is,
you know,
and it's fine to do that verbally during the meetings or.
yeah, we'll usually do something like that at the end of the meeting. And it doesn't have to be at every meeting. It's, if there's something to report, great. You can just let Cassandra know you have something you want to report and
Okay.
make sure
Yeah,
it's on the agenda.
So in Birgit, we can opine to you about what our thoughts are about things of value. And,
Oh, okay.
when it comes to properties that are contiguous and connect other properties and parcels and provide access, not dead ends, are of infinitely more value than those that are not connected to other properties or provide corridors. So take that as your first comment before you've even reported back on anything. But thank you very much.
Okay,
All right, so to make this official, can I have a motion to appoint Brigitte as our liaison to the Open Space Committee?
So moved.
Uh,
An
second?
appointment.
Somebody second that?
Second.
Okay, great. All in favor?
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye.
Kevin Hine, aye.
Deirdre Hobbs and I.
and that's it. You're at 5.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. So, yeah,
You
we're all
don't even
set.
need me to vote on my own.
So you're in. Thank you again. Thank you very much for doing that.
You're welcome.
Okay, so next we'll get into the bylaw. So last week we heard from MAPC. Carolyn's been hard at work reviewing things for us. We had to put the notices for the warrant together. These are just like a simple one-page document, what we might propose and what it's for, and putting that together. That's due next week, and so the order of these articles follows the way Cassandra has put together that notice of warrant. So, the first one is the changes to the wind energy bylaw. And again, the big thing is it's housekeeping more than anything else and moving a lot of stuff to regulations. Couple of places where Carolyn had made some questions about text and policy that's in it. One here was the monopole towers, which is in our existing bylaw, that these would just be monopole towers anytime you do it. And by the way, the bylaw is just regulating very large turbines. It's still not regulating anything smaller than a 500 kilowatt turbine. I was inclined to leave this decision and the other one that's going to follow to the Alternative Energy Committee and let them decide whether this language stays or not about monopoles. I guess there are other ways there are other structures that can support a large turbine other than a monopole. So Carolyn was just questioning, and can Carolyn jump in if you want to add anything?
Right. It was just in case you wanted to expand upon that. That's all. Like
Yep.
a lattice. I actually had in another community that had a bylaw limiting the structure to a monopole, and someone came in with a lattice, and there was a big debate over whether or not that was a variance request. So that was what was in the back of my mind when I highlighted that.
Okay. All right. Why is this highlighted?
I think it was just to clarify the language. And I'm trying to find it on my
Yeah, I was looking to see.
version as well.
Yeah, I'm looking in your version and see if you had a marginal note.
I think what my concern was this, is that the language was proposing to say a noise source will be considered in violation of this bylaw. I think we don't just mean like generically a noise source. We mean noise associated with the turbine and equipment
Okay.
would be considered a violation.
All right, then that makes sense. We'll just make that change right here.
So noise emanating from or associated with, some
Yes.
terminology like that.
Yes.
Okay, so that we take this part out and we'll just read like that. Okay. Now at the end, based on a comment, Carolyn, that you did with the solar bylaw, I added a new subsection to give us the authority for regulations, which was lacking since we're moving a lot of stuff to regulations. So that's the new F here. I don't think that's a problem. I just took the same language that was in the solar bylaw. And then these two things were, Carolyn suggested we don't need to do this. I probably agree. It was just sort of a memo to all of us and to the Alternative Energy Committee to think about in the future regulating and allowing for smaller scale wind turbines, but I suppose that doesn't need to be stated here with a reserved section. When this is all done and it all passes, you can just say to the Alternative Energy Committee, if you're going to add something, here's where you would add it, just to give them some guidance on where it would be placed. So if everybody's okay with that, I guess we can get rid of these two things.
Oh, I think it's helpful to have them, Tom.
All right, I don't care one way or the other. This was another one I was going to leave to the Alternative Energy Committee to decide, but
It like you just said, it just provides the reference point for where something would go in the future.
yeah, I don't think, Carol, correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't harm us one way or the other. But
I don't know that it harms you. I just question whether or not, when the Attorney General actually looks at this, they'll say, well, you have these two headings, but you have no text, you have no regulations to go with it. So there's the possibility that they'll see this as, look, we're just reserving this for future space and leave it alone. Or there's the possibility that they'll say, you shouldn't have a reference to something in your zoning bylaw that doesn't have the regulations to go with it. So they might strike it. But, even if they strike that, it's very easy for them to strike those two lines.
yeah. All right. Well, let me put that to the Alternative Energy Committee with that explanation of the possible way the AG may look at it, and let them decide it. I don't care one way or the other.
Would it make sense to change reserve because
Well, that's a
the
standard,
general
that's a standard
population
term when you
might
have,
not
a-
know what reserved means?
well, it's a
Would you
standard
really
term.
mean not allowed?
It's a
But
standard
under
term
consideration?
It's a standard term when you're doing statutes and regulations for something that's being a placeholder for something in the future.
I understand the concept. It's just that in terms of a lay person's interpretation of this, if I'm a building owner and I want to put the 55-gallon drum type, half a dozen on the roof of my building, I don't necessarily know what reserved means. What you're saying is we're reserving this as a spot for future language. But
If that's not understandable, I'll just remove it. Let's just remove it. I mean, it's
well, no,
not
you
worth
don't have
fighting
to
over,
remove it.
Clark. It's not worth making a big issue over. It
I'm
is-
not making a big issue.
It is a very easily understandable term. If
Tom,
it's
I'm not making a big issue out of it. I'm just
Well-
wondering if a layperson understands the word reserved in this context.
I guess I would just follow up with Clark's point, which I think is well taken. You know, by reserving certain items, Tom, does it anticipate a future action that may not take place? You know, I mean, just by reserving it, because there's other things we haven't reserved or don't reserve. And by reserving this, does it insinuate something that may or may not be done in the future? I don't know.
I'm simply.
Right, reserved for future
I'm simply
use.
inclined at this point to just take the stuff out.
Okay.
Please, Chris. All right.
Tom, could I just ask you to back up just a little bit, because I think we skipped over something under paragraph 7, the miscellaneous section, and signs.
Let me see it. Yeah.
And I'm not, could you scroll down just a little bit further on your version? Because I think it's under E. Right, so we have that final statement there, number 3, all signs shall comply with the requirements of the town sign regulations unless relief is granted by the planning board. Is that suggesting the planning board's going to could grant like a special permit for a sign that deviates from zoning, or do we need to expound upon that a little bit?
Well, I think if you're gonna deviate from the requirements, it's actually a variance from the zoning.
That's why I'm questioning it. So I
Yeah,
mean,
all
all
right.
signs shall comply unless relief is granted by the planning board. I don't know that that's the correct term to use there. And
Was
maybe
that
we
in-
don't need it.
Yeah, that comes from the existing bylaw, doesn't it?
It does, yes.
All right, yeah, actually, then that's not needed. It goes without saying that if a sign doesn't comply, it's gonna need a variance. So,
Right, right.
Bingo.
I think when we reviewed the actual wind turbine applications 15 or so years ago that came in, we posited that no one can write Coca-Cola up the monopole as a
A means of advertising or
Yeah.
something like that. Mhm.
a big piece of advertising on the thing.
Well, that's a good point, Clark, because I was just thinking not even a commercial advertisement, just a name of the vendor that is providing the
Right, yeah. sometimes
Operation.
Oh,
Like general
The
elect-
actual, the
someone
actual
who
head
provides
would
those.
have the company's name on it.
Yeah.
Not up the pole.
yeah, because these are substantial poles, and you have enough surface area to get substantial letters for signage on these things in a vertical fashion. So
Usually,
are
usually
we
they're on the
covered
main-
as this is presented
Yeah.
now, so that they can't put their label all over it? Or we have some say in that?
Well, it would be something signage as needed for directional purposes, or safety only. Something like that, as opposed to an advertising opportunity.
If you've seen these things, the only wording usually is the manufacturer's name on the nacelle at the top.
Well, that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. I don't even, can't we have some purview over that? Because if, you know, who wants to, oh, this is the town that has a nice harbor, or this is the town that has XYZ Corp of the big wind turbine that we know when we approach it by boat or by car or wherever.
Are we gonna, you want to start telling manufacturers not to put their name on their products?
I'm just saying, I'd
Well,
rather probably see something that blends in with the sky or with the forest around it than that it says XYZ Corp.
What's everybody's thought about that?
Well, I mean, if, you know, Vestas puts their name on the head of the turbine, that's what they typically do, right?
Correct.
And provided that it doesn't exceed the signage size requirements in the signage bylaw, presumably that's okay. I guess I was thinking of an advertising problem, or, I mean, yeah, you could write Cohasset in 6-foot high letters down the monopole, because these things are 150 feet.
Mm.
Something happened to Clark's communication.
What's that?
Lost you, Clark. We
Am
can
I
hear
here?
you.
Am I here? Can you hear
You're
me?
here
I-
now. Now we can hear
Yeah.
you.
Was my mouth moving and I wasn't talking?
Yes.
We heard your example of vertical Cohasset.
I think I just paused.
Oh,
I'm not chewing anything. I don't have gum.
See what I'm adding here.
So you're saying you would want to allow the manufacturer's name?
I don't think you have much choice in the way these things come. You know,
You know, I was thinking of the pole that Clark refers to. They're substantial height. They have a substantial diameter. You can put enough thick letters on it in a vertical fashion to mark it up and say whatever you want. We should have some oversight of that and
Yeah.
control of that.
I'm adding something here, so.
I'm not talking about putting something over the nacelle that might have the manufacturer of that at the point of this. I'm talking about the larger and pole structure.
Does number 4 address that concern?
Yeah, wouldn't it be cool for at Christmas time, they shine up the wind turbine with green and red, and then at Halloween, it's orange?
Well, I think the lighting requirements are mostly dictated by the FAA, so if the FAA allows them to do colored lights, they can do colored lights.
I think they just have like a blinking red light at the top.
Yeah, they don't want planes hitting them, so the FAA is gonna control that. That's why we mentioned in the FAA in the current bylaw. Is everybody good with 3 and 4?
Yep.
All right, so I'll just ask the Alternative Energy Committee about the monopole thing. Carolyn, if you want to give an example of the one you saw in the other town where there might be a special permit or variance, depending on the choice of tower, would you send that along?
I actually would just say, I think it is simpler, rather than to say that it's limited to a monopole, that, you know, the structure would allow, either do away with that sentence altogether. You know, the structure is going to be whatever current manufacturing and technology would allow, whether that's a monopole or whether it's a tower or whether it's a lattice. Does it matter to us?
Yeah,
Probably not.
the less chances for the Alternative Energy Committee to mess with this, the better. So, Boom, gone. All right,
Where are these allowed?
there was, oh, you made a comment.
Anywhere?
No, there was a comment about that somewhere.
Because I think we limited it to the
It was originally.
technology business district, and then we got rid of the technology business district.
No, yeah, but it is a use allowed in the 3A district, and I think Carolyn, you had a comment about that somewhere.
Yeah, I'm looking too.
I don't know where it was, but I'm pretty sure in the 3A district, it's still allowed, it was an allowed use. Because basically we carried over all the technology.
By special permit, SPP.
Yeah, everything was, everything that was in the technology business district with the exception of marijuana related uses was carried over.
So if Avalon wanted to put a big turbine on their property or they're in residence, they wouldn't be able to.
I think the
Stop and Shop could.
I think the residents would kill them. But
Well, no, I'm
yeah, no, I hear
talking
what you're
about
saying.
the
Yeah,
reality of getting a permit for that. I mean, they do have a lot of land to the west.
yeah. Be interesting if the new owner is going to seek to build the 50 units that never got built. There was room for another 50. The original proposal was 250 units. Yeah, I don't know where that went, but
I don't know. I'll double check that though. Maybe
yeah,
it
but
was-
I'm not really concerned about it. We can double check
Mhm.
the table of uses, but I'm pretty sure that they're allowed in the 3A district.
I think that's correct. Yes.
All right, so that's done, and I'll just tell us Alternative Energy Committee, and then the solar one. Why was this one?
And so, Tom, I haven't had.
Oh, this is the one. This is the one that mentioned the district, the solar one.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure that's allowed too under the table. We just have to double check the table.
So, Tom, just before we leave wind, there were a number of things like the special permit criteria and other things that
Yeah.
the original draft you wanted moved into regulations, and I actually said they should remain in the bylaw. I haven't had a chance this afternoon to compare the draft you sent with what.
No,
I saw
yours, I tried to
before.
just, again, when I cut and pasted, all of your highlights and things didn't think, so I went through.
Okay.
to make sure I captured them all.
Well,
Spent-
I will do the same thing. I just didn't have a chance to go through it this
Yeah,
afternoon.
I spent an inordinate amount of time trying to get, I don't know why sometimes cutting and pasting another document into this one gets.
It's not easy, no.
But anyway, that was, let me just. Where did you make that comment? Terms of a special permit, you wanted to keep this. Here. Rather than have that go to regulations.
Right, and I can go back through that text and move everything that I thought belonged in the bylaw back in.
Yeah, all right, so yeah, the stuff that's moving to regulations, which we'll have to vote on sometime before town meeting, by the way. Is now just slapped at the end as an appendix rather than coming up the works here, so I'll keep that highlighted there, that's may stay, okay. All right, I don't think there was anything else. And then in our little note, we are not having these subsections, so I can.
So did I hear you correctly then, Tom? You're thinking that everything that's going to move to regulations, you want to do as an appendix to the zoning bylaw?
No, as an appendix to the warrant article.
For
That's-
informational purposes only?
Correct.
Yeah, I don't want anyone to be under the impression that town meeting is approving regulations.
No.
Okay.
No, we'll make that note. But in here, in this document, they're also set out as an appendix now, rather than just coming right after the text. So I just thought that would make it easier to work with. So, on the solar one, this is largely housekeeping, but here's the one where we have to just double check if ground mounted solar is an allowed use in the 3A commercial district. I would like to think it is. But we need to check that.
Should there be a municipal exception?
To a special permit?
Right. Yeah, I mean, on 3A and in municipally owned property. Since we have one on the dump that's municipally owned, and the schools have been talking about putting them on their roofs for forever, but they're in
Well,
residential
yeah,
district.
no, and given that town hall and, present and future, and the schools are in residential areas, I would think it would behoove us to have some oversight.
Yeah, I mean,
I think neighbors would have a nutty if.
or
if a
municipal
really-
projects as special permits, not as of right.
We do that, Carolyn?
I think that might actually conflict elsewhere in the bylaw where where, certain governmental municipal uses are otherwise not subject to a special permit. I think you could, if you wanted to limit it by size, if you wanted, for example, if you wanted to allow solar parking canopies, for example, but something that was going to be like a large array, like, on top of, a landfill or something like that, you could make a distinction in that way.
Yeah,
Right, there was a proposal for the other Cohasset Heights landfill to have solar panels, which much of which was in the technology business district, but some in the residential district.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the question is, do you want to limit it to 3A?
well,
You could
as
just
for-
say any.
As for the rest of the town and residential districts, the changes we made to Article 4, which would be very small scale, individual building panels, we've already taken care of, so those are gonna be allowed by whatever we created, right, as of right or special permit. So I think for just these large scale ones, we probably do want to limit it to a commercial area.
What about municipal/open space? Adding that.
Well, the bylaw right now prohibits almost everything in open space.
Right, yeah, I mean, for
I mean,
example.
I don't
that
think we
might be
need to, I don't think we
controversial,
need
but
to make that
the
decision
Lily
today.
Pond would be a great place to have, or the Aaron River Reservoir, the large scale solar, because there's no shading, and
No,
a lot of communities are looking at these water sources as a place to locate large solar panel arrays. I mean, I'm not for or against it. I'm just putting it out there because your limit of 3A business districts, commercial districts, that's not necessarily where I would expect to see solar arrays coming.
So typically, Clark, it's by the use of the photovoltaic power, be it the commercial building, like over by the pond, might be the wastewater treatment facility over there that could use the power and could source their own on the roof or on some other land space around it. Or with photovoltaic things becoming smaller, so you're seeing it even on signage now. You're seeing it on highway signs that have some access to solar power just to power
Sure.
the battery that's got that sign, flashing, during the dark hours, that type of thing.
Yep.
My own thought is to leave the idea of proposing anything to be built in open space until the day somebody actually proposes to do it. If the town at some point in the future thinks, it needs to generate more solar power and it needs some of the town-owned open space to do it, then deal with it then. You'd have to go to town meeting and change the table of uses to allow it in the open space district, but I
Okay,
would-
so Carolyn
I-
is saying that municipal buildings would be exempt from a special permit for large solar arrays, and that's
Well-
where you would expect to see them.
What I think I'm making a distinction between though, Clark, is, this bylaw is aimed at large scale ground mounted solar arrays. So you could have something such as, a landfill or some large open area that the town owns where, in theory, do you want to allow solar there? Then there are accessory structures, like things that we see on roofs, things that we're seeing on signs, parking canopies that, might be other ways to get some solar use and solar energy storage without necessarily having it be a field of solar panels.
Right.
But this bylaw isn't addressing any accessory uses at all.
So if you want to put a solar panel on your roof, you can do it right now, as of right, without a special permit. So this special permit process would be limited to 3A and the commercial districts
This would
and
be limited to the
ground
large,
mounted.
yeah, this is be limited to the large scale facilities. The changes we made to Article 4 deal with all the smaller ones. The house side, individual house panels.
Right, but
And-
if you wanted to
And
put,
individual house ground mounted, we also dealt with that that was the focus of the changes that the AG wanted in Article 4. This is really, this section of the bylaw is limited just to the large scale things.
right, I just don't see people on 3A wanting to use up their area for large scale solar.
Well, maybe that's why we don't have any. I mean, that's what it was,
Right.
that's what it was limited to before. It was
I mean, you're always fighting for parking and stuff. What Carolyn brought up of, like they have at the Hingham T is the canopy over the parking.
Yeah,
Maybe you'd see something like that, but they really wouldn't be ground mounted.
I think that's
Those would be
something, again,
structure-
that's probably.
Structure mounted.
That's probably covered by Article 4's changes that we did already. Because we talked about that, but this is for the scale of what's on our dump. And, previously, our existing bylaw limited it to one commercial district on 3A, so we're really not changing that. And whether it actually gets built, anything ever gets built at this scale on 3A is a whole nother story. But if we're not going to let these be built at all, because we don't think anybody's gonna do it, then you just eliminate the whole section of the bylaw, but I don't agree with doing that.
I wasn't suggesting that.
All right, well then, again, the change is just, the existing bylaw limits it to a certain section of 3A, all right, so does this. Except it's more of 3A. And again, open space, I don't know, Carolyn, if we have a prohibition against structures in the open space district under Article 5 and the town said, I want to put up a solar structure, would they have to change the bylaw or would they be exempt? And could go ahead and do it.
I think you'd have to change the use table to specifically allow that use in open space.
That's what I think, so I would deal with that as it comes. At the time that it comes, if it ever comes. This highlighted material here, Carolyn, you had a note about, well, you first of all, you said this section 2 is duplicative, so this is. That's duplicative of the highlighted sections, so, that's what this can go to. You have a note here about clear when a special permit or a site plan review is required. Okay. Somebody's on 3A, they're gonna propose this. If it's part of a building, you know, something that building or a broader construction project, it's probably that building that's gonna dictate whether it's a special permit or a site plan review, or both. I'm trying to get what your thought here was, what you don't want us to do with this.
Me?
No, that was me, and I'm looking at my notes. You know, in the use table, everything at least is currently supposed to be, or a ground mounted solar installation is supposed to be by special permit from the planning board. I'm not sure what I was thinking there with site plan review, because I'm not seeing it in that section.
Well, a project on 3A, any commercial project is gonna have site plan review anyway, right? If it was a purely solar only project to build a large array on a lot in 3A, let's say Situate Hill, for example. Got 8 acres up there, they're gonna tear down the warehouses they're building and they're gonna put up a bunch of solar arrays.
Okay, so I'm just,
That probably still has a site plan review, but I'm thinking it probably all should be by special permit.
well, I just found in my notes too, so where it says that no ground mounted solar photovoltaic installation shall be constructed without first obtaining a special permit and or undergoing site plan review by the planning board as indicated under the table of principal uses. Currently, the table of principal uses just reflects that this use would be subject to a special permit. And then I do have an asterisk. However, my revised version doesn't indicate what the asterisk signifies here. Unless that asterisk is meant to signify site plan review.
I believe that the asterisks are meant to signify site
Okay,
plan review.
all right. Okay. So then what we're really saying is all of these large arrays are going to be subject to special permit and site plan review.
All right, so this language is okay then.
It is.
Okay. All right. You brought up, so and then where did you make this? Oh, application and plan requirements. So we're taking. I have no issue with application requirements, details. Okay, yeah, so we need to keep this in, even if we're moving because we're moving everything out.
Correct.
Right. Okay, we're good with that. All right. I'm just trying to see what else you had in here. I don't know that you had any other, no, I don't think you had any other changes there. All right. All right. All right, so that I don't even have to discuss. I'll turn it over. Let them know what's up to date. Okay.
Tom, when do you plan on forwarding these to the Alternative Energy Committee, so I can make sure I've reviewed them and all the changes are there.
Yeah, I sent your comments to, the subcommittee I'm dealing with is Martha Gangemi. I sent them to her yesterday. I thought I had sent them to her earlier. I was gonna follow up tonight's meeting with those, with what we've just done to them and just say, when you guys would like to endorse it, or if you want to speak to me or town council, let me know.
Okay,
I really, whatever, I don't want too much mystery, that's all.
Mhm.
But, I had a fairly substantive discussion with them, a couple of months ago, or late spring, about all of this, so nothing has really changed substantively from what I discussed with them then.
Okay.
So I'll copy you an email I send to her. It'll probably be, it may be tomorrow, it might be Friday. You gotta get.
okay,
All right. Article number 3 is the floodplain one that we went over with MAPC. So all the changes here, I just changed theirs from a highlighted in red thing to strike throughs and underlines. So I think I captured everything, so.
Is right on B location, it says as an overlaid district. Should it just be as an overlay district?
Where are you reading it?
It says capital B location, the floodplain and water protection district is herein established as an overlaid district. Don't we just call it an overlay district?
That's MAP speak. Doesn't matter.
Well, it's not consistent with the way we have referred to overlay districts previously.
Nice catch, Amy.
Ditto.
All right,
And
anyway.
the actual overlay district, the area hasn't changed at all.
No.
from
no
what's
boundaries.
existing.
No, really, these are just, this is gonna be easy to explain at town meetings since our bylaw was in fairly good shape compared to the new model, so, it's a lot of really minor housekeeping changes just to comply with the state requirement. So I guess the next step for this one is there is a pre-review with the state that's gonna go on, and there is Carolyn's office is gonna review it as well.
and actually, we did review it. There was only one question raised as to a citation, which we can, I don't know, Cassandra, if you had a chance to look at it or not, but I can also go back and see.
Yes.
The violation.
So, yeah, I heard back I had sent Alex's comments to MAPC that same day, and I heard back from them late this afternoon that the section that they were referencing wasn't a section of the bylaw, it was a section of a federal law, so they clarified the language in that section
Okay.
to specify that it was the federal law that they were referencing.
Where is that?
It's at the very
like
end.
literally the end.
Literally the end.
If you go to the definition of violation.
Oh,
Yep.
so
This
this
is very wordy. Is this going to get edited for grammar and brevity?
no, it's already. Our
Well,
existing,
There's a lot of mumbo jumbo in here that's unnecessary for a regular person to understand.
okay. Our current bylaw is this wordy. And as much as I want to create simplicity, this is strictly being done to comply with the state's requirements of a model bylaw. So blame the Commonwealth for this, not us. But is this the correct reference now in the violation of US Code of Regulations? Hello?
Hi. So yes, so
Okay.
that version that you have there is the one that I received prior to this afternoon. So in violation, they changed it to say after the section 60.3 portion.
Yeah.
So section 60.3 of Title 44, Part 59 of US Code of Federal Regulations is presumed to be in violation, etc.
60.3. paste.
And I can forward you
No, that's
the
all right.
email,
We can-
Tom, that way.
No, that's right. It's easy to do right here. Done. All right. So the only change to that one is going to be if we hear back from the state or, you know, that they have some issue with it. All right. The land alteration, as you know, from a couple of weeks ago, I wrote a second version of an edit. Again, trying to make it simple and step by step, easy to understand, and what's being regulated, what's being exempted. So this is the version 2. That is what I would suggest be the working model at the moment. And the main changes again are to take out the confusing references to the assessor code classifications for properties. I understand why we put that in 2018, but it's more confusing. To take out the exemption of lots under 18,000 square feet. To take out the exemption for accessory structures.
Wasn't
There's-
that just to allow people to build garages? If it's an attached garage,
If
it
it was,
would
if
be
it's
a part of
yeah,
the
if it-
single family residence. If it's a
Correct.
detached garage, then it
Correct.
would trigger a special permit.
exposed ledge can be removed for the primary structure, and if that has a built-in garage, that's included. And for the utilities and the septic system or whatever, but everything else now would, if you're going to remove exposed ledge.
Would that include driveways and walkways and things like that?
Go back to where it is. Let me go back to where that language is.
It would definitely include the swimming pool cabana.
Special permit will be required for the excavation of a structure or an accessory building to the principal use of lot, such as but not limited to fences, sheds, barns, patios, lot pools. All right. It doesn't say driveways specifically.
So a driveway, walkway would trigger.
No. No, I guess if we want to be specific about it, we should be specific about it.
I think it would be a good idea to include that. I talked to John Helen today, last week, and he was referencing the Cunningham Bridge project there, as kind of the driveway was included in their primary structure kind of layout, and especially the driveway, the way they are. I looked at the plan, and it requires kind of all the ledge removal in like kind of in the back that you see looking at from the bridge over into the property, and it's a lot. So if we would add that would be a good idea, I think.
You're saying to put a driveway as a trigger for the ledge special permit?
Yeah.
Yes, correct. So let's not consider it as part of the primary structure.
So we have to specifically mention it here.
Yes. Yeah.
As a non-exempt. And it would be somewhere else too.
Because it's not saying that they can't do it. It's just that if they're gonna be
That's right.
knocking it down,
Right. Yeah,
then they gotta come in and say, this is what we need to do, and we
I
found this
think
ledge
that
over
we
here
should
that we want to
include
replace.
sidewalks in that.
What's that,
I
Amy?
think walkways should be included in this because there is no standard dimensional constraint, right? That it's 2 feet by 6 feet or whatever. It's not specified. So it could be substantial, just 2 feet off of a driveway width. We don't specify it.
Yeah, I'll just add it.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and I mean, that project that's going up at Cunningham Bridge will be Exhibit A if anybody questions why we're taking away exemptions, but so, all right. The other thing here, there was incorporating the replication concept that we employed at the Actors Row House. And then the other thing, oh, hold on, where was it? Where's my note? Oh, right here. Now, I don't know if Concom still does this, but back in the day,
You can't see that, Tom, by you blocking it.
why am I blocking one? Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know why
Let's move
that.
it on
Just
further.
move your cursor.
Yeah.
Let's move the cursor.
Right.
Yeah. Give it up.
Anyway, so back before we had a conservation agent, there used to be a piece of paper that was circulated for a building permit that every board had to sign off on, even if you didn't need a permit from that board. So we at least had our chair review a project with the building inspector and say it needs a permit or it doesn't need a permit. Carolyn, you tell me if this can be done. This is number one, but the thought here was not only obviously to, hopefully whoever the building inspector is at the time directs an applicant to us for a permit when it's obviously needed, but to have all the projects that might involve ledge removal come before us to make the determination if a permit is going to be needed or not, for us to make that determination rather than the building inspector. I don't know if we can do that. I don't know if we want to do that. I don't know if that procedure, now that we have a conservation agent, and I'm talking about a procedure that was done 30 years ago. So, but it would be letting the planning board screen everything that's going to involve ledge removal and say whether a permit's going to be involved or not. I don't know if we want to do that, but I just think that I look at every time I drive past that Cunningham Bridge project, I'm like saying, did we miss something here? Did we drop a ball here?
Yeah.
Because that's an awful lot of alteration that's going on. And it's frankly an abomination. And I don't know, so that's the thought about this here. I don't know if we can do it, or do we even want to do it?
Well, could I ask this? Why would it be unique just to a land alteration bylaw? I mean, technically, no building permit is supposed to issue unless they've complied with the building code and any applicable bylaw requirements. Now, I hear what you're saying about the circulation and the sign-off card. A lot of towns used to have that. And, I think a lot of them have gotten away, from that sign-off.
Yep.
So I guess to answer your question, I don't think it's necessarily prohibited, but I think it's also something that you might want to consider, just putting a requirement like this into the more administrative section of the bylaw to make it clear. But I don't see any harm with having something like this in the land alteration bylaw.
I mean, the other thing is it's somewhat implying that there's like a second guessing of the building inspector.
Well, there is that. And look, I don't think anyone's necessarily going to take zoning enforcement action just because this statement is in the bylaw. Like saying you have to have a stormwater bylaw permit from the Conservation Commission. Well, you simply do if it triggers the bylaw. This to me is kind of like one of those common sense things that if you want to put it in, it might generate, some pushback of folks who might think, like you said, well, the planning board gets to review everything. No, I mean, I don't think it's any different from now when an applicant comes before you and you ask, well, have you been to the Conservation Commission because you recognize that this is going to require stormwater bylaw? I mean, we're not holding something up because they need to get another permit from another independent board.
What's the board's sense on this? Keep it or not?
Well, if it doesn't produce harm and it does provide notification, we're against this kind of problem all the time. And this situation at Cunningham Bridge is just the most egregious one that we have experienced since at least I've been on the board. So I would rather leave it in and see how it plays than to not have it there and then find ourselves in a situation where once again we're caught without any relief.
The only, if I may, sorry, Amy, I didn't mean to interrupt if you up to were done. The only thing I would suggest changing in this is I would remove the written approval by the planning board that no special permit is required. We have that you can't begin any land alteration activities or get a building permit until you've got your special permit from the planning board and your stormwater permit from the Conservation Commission. That's fine. But this written approval by the planning board that no special permit is required, to your point, Tom, it does become, does the planning board agree with the building inspector that no special permit is required? And then how is the planning board actually going to indicate that no special permit is required? Are we going to start putting things on the agendas every month for the board to vote that no special permit is required? And what does that review process look like? So I would just take that language out.
Yeah,
which
I just did.
So Carolyn, can you explain to me what your logic is about this? I don't understand it. It's not a critique. It's just I don't understand.
What I was suggesting that Tom remove was some language that said that no activities were to begin until the planning board has issued a written approval that no special permit is required. That's not really something the planning board does. The planning board acts on special permit applications, but we don't make determinations that a special permit is not required for something. That's usually at least at the initial, front line, that's going to be the building inspector who, upon receipt of an application, says, you need this relief from the zoning board and this relief from the planning board, and you've got to go see those other boards before you come back to me. That goes without saying. But this idea that the planning board will now have to give written approval that no special permit is required means everyone's going to have to come to the planning board and put it on your agenda, and you're going to have to take a vote to say we agree that no special permit is required. And I think that just, one just is unnecessary and confusing to folks. If there's a project out there that commences and we believe that a special permit is required, you call John Hallen and you say, what are you doing out there? We think a special permit's required, and then it's up to him to issue a cease and desist.
So, but in this particular case that we're talking about, we didn't have any, how did we end up with the Cunningham Bridge situation?
We had a large.
How did the existing regulations fail to present this case to us so that we would opine about it?
We had a large home review, and it's an extremely large house. So the house is exempt from removing ledge from this bylaw as it exists today. And because it's 9,000 square feet, it's a pretty big footprint of exposed ledge that's being removed. then there's the driveway, then there's the accessory structures also, which under the current bylaw are all exempt activities. So it's happened because, we let a 9,000 square foot house be built under the large home review, which again is a bylaw that doesn't have much teeth to it. And there are all these exemptions that go with it. And when you're building something that large, it's just going to cover more area.
So we are therefore extracting those exemptions at this point.
Some of them, we still, as a practical matter, so that we don't get involved in a regulatory taking of a property, we have to exempt the house and we have to exempt the utilities to serve the house. But the rest of it, we can regulate and say, well, maybe you shouldn't have this huge circular driveway. Maybe you shouldn't have a 6-car garage. That is
Well, we're not determining what the applicant wants. We're just saying if you're going to change the ledge of a certain height from these activities, you have to come for a special permit.
Yeah, but in the special
We're not
permit,
saying we don't like circular driveways.
No, but in the special permit, we could say no, because the accessory structures are quite substantial and are unnecessarily removing a lot of exposed ledge. We could say no. But yes, at the base of this, we're just telling them you have to go through a permit process and justify what you're going to do. As opposed to today, where all those accessory uses are exempt from the bylaw.
It's not a prohibition. It's like a review special permit.
I mean, the Actors Row house, I mean, the ledge that they were removing that we asked them to replicate by exposing ledge in another part of the property was for the pool house, I think. So, really that structure was exempt from us saying anything, but we got them to agree to do that. And that, now we would take that pool house out of an automatic pass and say, no, we got to review this.
Okay, I've got it now.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so.
Yeah, one addition to the attached garage. That's what I sent in my email as
Yeah,
well.
so here, let's get to Brigitte's suggestions so her suggestions were dealing with the exemptions.
And that is also, so like the attached garage, that's also stemming from the Cunningham Bridge project, because as John Helen explained to me, what they do is the garage is attached, but in a way that they create an arch, and
like a breezeway.
yeah, a bridge, and it's only attached on, say, like second or third floor, that it kind of briefly walks, kind of has a short path over, and that then gives way to constructing the garage, kind of all along the back, and it's a 3-car garage on top of it, kind of all along, kind of the back there as well, where we see the kind of massive removal of ledge. So let's be a little bit more precise about the attachment type, kind of, so like have a full attachment, not kind of interesting bridge constructions.
But only if connected. Only if.
I had fully.
I don't know if you can regulate that. I mean, whenever you create a I mean, the reality is, whether it gets a review or not, it's not a prohibition. It's just that it's a special permit. It's not like you're saying if you have an attached or detached garage, one triggers and the other doesn't.
Okay, but
Well, a garage that's merely attached to the house by a breezeway or a hallway, even an enclosed hallway, I don't think is an attached garage. I don't think of it as that way, and that's how people will get around that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just an architect, but I would say if you connect it in any way, it's attached.
yeah, and that's probably the interpretation that they used for the Cunningham Bridge project. But that gave, kind of that opened, kind of the, kind of situation where they can take, kind of this incredibly amount of ledge in order to create that garage. Then if you had another architecture where it is attached, they would have had to revise their project significantly. And that's what I think we can say. We can say no there, and you have to come up with a different type of architecture because it's just excessive.
You could change the definition of primary structure and define it more closely, but creative people with their clients' goals in mind can find ways around the language issue. But if it's just a special permit, it's not a prohibition. So we're just saying you got to come in and tell us what you're doing.
That I don't quite agree. Then why do we do the special permit? I mean, is it just for our entertainment?
It's not a prohibition. It's come in and tell us what you're doing, and if it seems
why should
reasonable,
they
we
do
get
that?
to approve it. If it
But-
doesn't seem reasonable, we get to say no.
Okay, so that was the point. That's what I kind of want to have more reason, more clear reason to say no, so that we don't have these, what Tommy's called it, breezeways, right? Yeah, and kind of called it bridge. Yeah.
Again, it's not a prohibition to remove ledge.
But I think that the point is to maybe be clearer on what a detached garage is.
Attached.
I mean, do we say up front that the goal is to preserve ledge insofar as it's practical?
That would be my goal, yes.
Right, but it's not a prohibition.
Yeah, I mean, basically, as Birgit said, it's almost possible to do anything, right? And Clark kind of verified that by saying having a clever and studious designer can basically solve almost any conundrum.
And then they just present it to us and that's it. And then they get a special permit. So I don't quite understand, kind of our goal is not quite, kind of clear about what we want to achieve.
Well, again, I think the goal should be stated as a part of the introduction to this section of the bylaw. If
Maybe that
the
would be
goal is
good.
is ledge preservation,
Yeah.
then you say that. If you need to define primary structure, then you change the definition.
Okay.
And if the ledge can't be preserved, then there's a mechanism, or the term we've used is replacement of it. I thought we got clever with that with another property over by the harbor.
That's right.
Although they never actually proceeded with the project. So we don't really have a verified example.
But as it was put in front of us, they swapped something and exposed some ledge or for
Yeah.
others that they were taking.
Right.
Which in itself, actually exposing ledge is not a good endpoint necessarily either. So I just want to point that out to make sure
Yeah.
we're not
Mm.
giving
Right.
people the idea that they can peel back the topsoil to expose ledge because it looks good and it's clean, when that may not be ideal either for a number of reasons.
I know ledge replication sounds nearly impossible. Like you could build it out of concrete and spray paint it gray so it looks like ledge.
So maybe what we should do is not try to wordsmith this here, but ask Kevin and Birgit to actually wordsmith it to come back to us. I think it's really hard to do it on a fly
Right.
with something that produces an exact meaning that you're attempting to achieve.
Well, the other thing I thought about with regard to ledge is, there's exposed ledge and then there's areas around exposed ledge. And we all know the exposed areas around the ledge typically just it adds to the area of the ledge, because as we know, the ledge doesn't automatically drop down straight into the ground at the edge of it. It's typically a sloping feature. And if you've got a area of exposed ledge, you typically have an area of ledge that's very shallow beneath the surface around that area.
Yeah.
So it has occurred to me with our discussions around ledge about it's not just the area that's exposed, but there's also could be some value in attaching some value to a buffer around exposed ledge. And that would account for the ledge that's just beneath the surface. And if you peel back the poison ivy that's already grown over it and the 6 inches of leaves and detritus on top of it, you'd have more exposed ledge, or ledge that was actually probably exposed in the not too distant past. And I think that's part of the problem with the Cunningham Bridge too, is a lot of what we saw project over there and the development of that is a lot of what we've seen exposed was just beneath the surface, and it may not have been visible to the casual observer even walking on the site, but it was pretty readily available when you got in there with some equipment or you started peeling back that thin veneer on top of the bedrock, and lo and behold, the place turns into a quarry and there's all sorts of ledge that's exposed. And that's what we're seeing or have seen.
I don't think Tom's edit captures that exactly, but why don't we move on since it's getting late? And
All right, so anyway.
we can talk about it next time.
Yeah, no, I'll circulate this, but I just put in a definition of garage to address Birgit's issue. To distinguish what's detached and attached. And then the other major point she made was about regulating the volume of material that's removed. The driveway issue we just dealt with, so we're not gonna deal with that. We just made driveways non-exempt, so.
Okay.
So I'll play with this the next time, so we'll look at that. We'll look at that again on the meeting on the 4th. All right, Planning Board 5 is the mitigation bylaw. We are, Carolyn, awaiting your firm's
Yep.
draft on that, so we'll just.
Can I ask, Carolyn, were you able to identify some conceptual justification for this idea? I mean, I personally think it is a real idea and a real onerous problem in our particular context. But were you able to find some legal support for this idea?
All of my research so far for any kind of development impact bylaw that exists and has been approved by the Attorney General really relates to some sort of large scale development, and it is usually commercial. So I have not seen anything that really calls out like a single family residential property. But maybe a way to address it is not to identify it necessarily as, a single family house, but to identify it as a project that perhaps exceeds a certain number of square feet.
Yeah,
Or
some context argument.
Yeah, exceeds a certain amount of impervious surface or creates in excess of a certain amount of parking spaces, things like that. So it isn't necessarily going to be linked to a specific use, but anything that has these, we'll call it, higher impacts.
Right, significant impact. Wellesley has a project of significant impact, a PSA status for that gets reviewed, and usually it's commercial projects, but it could also be a subdivision.
Right.
The original proposal wasn't proposing to apply this to the residential districts unless for a subdivision. It was
Good.
It was only designed, as I originally wrote it, for subdivisions and the commercial districts, and
That'll make it easier to pass on the floor.
and
right.
in preparation really for
So Nevada has a
anything in the
regulation about this.
MBTA district. What's that?
Nevada has a regulation about this. project, yeah. So there is some conceptual understanding of the existence of damage in excess of regular use. And I think that's really what we're talking about.
Yeah, but not from a single family use.
Well,
And you'd be
as
hard.
Carolyn said, what Carolyn said was not to tie it to, but to describe it as an event that produces something which has substantial damage potential. And you know, the question is going to be, how do we actually then create the justification for invoking it? And that's where this idea of only a commercial project seems to be regulated. But so, you know, I mean, Carolyn is the lawyer, so we're going to try it. I think we have to try it.
I don't disagree.
Well, I will have something for you. Yes.
And I don't disagree. I just, in my draft, it was simply just applied to certain districts. And that covered any potential project within those districts. And you would look at it project by project, and you could, there were I don't know if there were thresholds. I think there were. The Dedham bylaw, I think, had some trigger thresholds of how much property was involved in activity, but I don't have a problem with that either. So we don't capture everything that happens in those districts, but, you know, be it the harbor, the village, 3A, the MBTA overlay district, those were and a subdivision, a residential subdivision like Black Horse Lane. I think that's where we should be trying to capture this stuff. And it's easily addressed by just naming those districts and projects.
Yeah, but what's the difference, Tom, between Black Horse Lane and Howe Road, where 6 houses were built in 3 years on raw land and massive amounts of ledge and vegetation was removed? I mean, the problem is creating the justification for why that kind of situation, which is opening up an area that has previously been settled and then expanding it without any regulatory requirements.
Unless there would be for ledge removal, there would be for large home review, and maybe other permits, but, you know, if those 6 lots were developed by 6 different people, I think that's going to be impossible to regulate that, because where are you going to say, does the burden come from when lot 1 is developed or lot 6 is developed? Subdivision, you can measure that because they're all going to be built together. And it's all one owner.
Well,
but you can't do that with individual lots at a time, right? It's impossible.
Well, so in that particular case, and on the Howe Road case, 3 houses were built simultaneously.
Okay, so what would have been the mitigation to make that guy build a sidewalk?
No, it would actually have been compensation for the destruction of the pre-existing infrastructure.
Which was what?
As a result of putting in electricity, water, heavy trucks, ledge removal, vegetation removal, that produced harm. I mean, the value of
if a contractor coming in to build a house destroys town infrastructure in the course of doing it, they hit a gas line, they hit a water line, they knock a pole over, they got to replace that and they got to fix that. That goes without saying.
Yes, but they don't. But it's not regulated as it relates to the surface effect. So, for example, they can put the pipe back in there, but there's nobody that goes back and says, okay, this needs to be a smooth road, because it was a smooth road before.
All right, but I'm just telling you that that's going to be difficult to do with individual lots. That's why Carolyn's getting the big bucks to take a shot at it. But,
yeah. I mean, this will become your actual namesake, right?
We talked about this a little bit, but I think Carolyn's got to make a stab at it in a way that she thinks is practical, and then
all right,
we can talk about it again.
Yes.
All right, we're going to do just one more tonight, get it out of the way. PB6 is, we're adding in now an article to deal with the change to the ADU bylaw that the new state law is requiring. The Affordable Homes Act that's just passed. It's trying to encourage ADU development as a way of creating more affordable housing units. And so I think the changes have to be done by February, so it's just the right time to put this into our fall lineup. So Carolyn has taken a draft of it. She's given us two choices of versions, and I guess the difference in the two versions is whether you tell me if I'm wrong, that the main difference is one version would allow just one ADU on a lot, the other one would allow multiple ADUs on a lot.
Right. So just one or a couple of clarifications that the new state law takes effect February 2nd. We don't have to have a bylaw in place prior to then, but we all know what's going to happen February 3rd is we're going to get an application in for an ADU, and John Hallen and others are going to struggle with, well, what exactly is it that I'm supposed to do here? So, I think we can try to get ahead of this if that's what we want to do. The other thing
I'd rather do it, since the new changes we just made last fall to ADUs, nobody's tried to utilize that bylaw yet. So before we get anything and get a confusion of old bylaw, new bylaw, let's just change the bylaw and get it out.
That's fine. The only caveat I just want to put out there for folks is that the statute does call for the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities to promulgate guidelines or regulations on ADUs. Whether they do that by February 2nd, is anyone's guess at this point. It may very well turn out that we go through this process of amending our bylaw, and then there might be something that comes out from the state agency that we might have to look at again and make further amend, but we can cross that bridge when we come to it, as they say.
Yeah.
I know there was a question from Woody Chittick today. I don't know if that was copied to everyone, but Woody was questioning the size of the ADU, which is, not supposed to be larger than 1/2 the gross floor area of the principal dwelling, or 900 square feet. And I think Woody was making an argument that it should be larger.
Yeah.
This is the definition straight out of the statute.
The new statute?
Mass General Law right now has ADUs at 900 square feet.
Oh, okay.
And lots of towns replicate that, but the reality is we could make it a little bit bigger.
Well, I think you probably could, or if you wanted to think about some tiered structures, because one of the other questions that's going to come up at some point is, you're going to ask me, what's the quantum of vote for this bylaw? Well, if the definition of ADU absolutely matches what's found in state law, it's going to be a majority vote. If we start tinkering with borrowing from what we like from the state version, but tinkering with it a little bit, I think now we're back into a 2/3 quantum of vote at town meeting. Now, that may not be your motivating factor, but it is something to consider. Or, we could also consider, do you want to do the by right ADUs that's consistent with the state's definition, and then consider some further tier? You could consider that as well. I think the biggest decision point really has to do with the fact that a single ADU has to be allowed by right.
No special permit process.
Only if you're going to allow more than one ADU.
Oh, wow. Okay.
For special permit.
And
Yes.
I'll tell everybody that Woody called me after he sent that email, and we talked about that. And his thought, my thought too, is I don't think we want to get into allowing multiple ADUs on a property.
Mm-hmm.
But what about having special permit for over 900 square feet?
Well,
I th-
yeah, he's definitely, and I think even when we were making these changes last fall, he was an advocate for a bigger ADU. And, you know, he brought up personal examples of people in town who, you know, if spouses pass, they want to stay in the house, but it'll be bigger than 900 square feet. And, you know, I think about that myself, and my basement might be in a little excess of 900 square feet. I don't exactly know, but it's probably close. But
Yeah, but you don't have enough FAR to add an ADU,
no, my basement exists. My basement already exists. But
even by special permit. You can only increase by 10%.
I wouldn't be increasing anything. I'd be moving to my basement.
Yeah.
Anyway, but so
There's not much
you know,
light in basements, though.
there are people, you know, given the sizes of the houses in town, the average sizes of these houses, you know, there is a thought to say that people want to stay in them. 900 feet can be rather constricting. So if Carol and we can do that, I'm not, you know, Woody is almost the thought, I think, and if he's listening, don't let me misconstrue you, but of not having any limit and, you know, just judge it case by case. But I would be okay with 1,250. If we can do that under the new state law. Obviously, we're doing this change because we have to comply with the new state act and we don't want to, you know, so if we can do that, and then I would take the option where they're only letting one on the site. And now you're telling me that would be as of right, and I don't know, didn't we make our changes last fall to as of right? Maybe we didn't.
No, it's still a special permit
Is it?
Mhm.
Okay, all right, so I
by
mean,
the
if that's
ZBA. It's a ZBA special permit.
yeah, if that's what we have to do, but I don't think we should open the door to multiple ADUs on a property, you know, something becoming like a hotel or condo or
You
know,
excuse me to
boarding
interrupt,
house.
Tom, but I still think a special permit, if you go over the 900 square foot threshold, to me makes sense. I mean, I've
If we can do that.
designed a couple of ADUs recently, and the client just didn't want to stay under the 900 square feet. They just, I mean, I got a variance.
Well, Carolyn, can we do that? Can we pick the version where we only allow one? You have 900 square feet as of right. Can we do up to 1,250 by special permit?
I think you could do that.
That makes sense.
You know, I will certainly, I'll certainly run that by the folks at the AG's office, see what their thought process is on that.
Great.
Because there's still a lot of questions, like even the statement in the new law that talks about more than one accessory dwelling unit, you know, shall be by special permit. There are some who think the new law requires that bylaws allow more than one ADU on a lot by special permit. I don't happen to share that view. I think that's still discretionary, that if we wanted to allow more than one, we could require a special permit for that. But, you know.
Amy, before I see your hand up, so go ahead.
I was just thinking, given the new affordable housing that's being built at the intersection of Jerusalem and 228, I think before we really lock this in, I think we need to have some scale discussions. Because let's say I have an acre yard and I decide I want to put 3 ADUs on it. Is that possible? Or, you know, if you say 1,200 square feet, but if you say 1,200 square feet and you think about a small affordable house, you're starting to get into this kind of gray area where you're making the ADU conception is to be small, right, and to be unobtrusive. And I just wonder if there's something we're missing here about thinking what we should be providing.
We're not, we just all decided, I think by consensus here, that we're not going to choose the option that's going to allow for multiple ADUs. It's just going to be one. It's still going to be subject to setbacks, height, and either FAR, or if we keep what we have today to lot coverage restrictions. So, and then the square footage is limited already in our existing bylaw and would continue to be limited to either 900 square feet by right or 1250 by special permit. So that's the constrictions on it. We're not going to get a super large structure. If somebody's building a detached ADU. I mean, remember that the bylaw change was to allow for detached ADUs for the first time. We still could be getting ADUs within the existing footprint of a house, like in the case of my house, but those are the limits. The other limits of zoning are still there.
Well, I think the problem with multiple ADUs is, the concept of short-term Airbnb bungalows or
Yep.
yurts or all that stuff that's, not really the intent of an ADU, I don't think. Or a tiny house community. And I think for Cohasset, baby stepping and allowing one ADU definitely makes sense, Tom.
Yeah.
And if I could just follow up on
I
Clark's
don't want to add the definition of yurt to the bylaw.
Yeah, well, you know what I'm talking about. I mean,
No, I know what a
short-term
yurt is,
rental.
yeah.
But Carolyn was going to say something.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just when Clark said an Airbnb or short-term rental, one other thing we can do is we can prohibit the accessory dwelling unit from being used as a short-term rental if we would like to do that.
Do it.
Well, one thing that comes to mind with this ADU is the existing guest houses that are out there that people would want to convert to an ADU so that they don't have to plow their neighbor's driveway every winter, and and so they don't narc on them, because they're out there. We know they're out there. Unfortunately, the guest house option is in some cases the only option that is allowed, or certainly with the previous ADU. So I would expect that guest houses would be a category for conversion to this new.
I would think so. It might just be a matter of whether or not it fits the square footage limitation to be now considered allowed by right.
Right. Yeah.
Now, the other thing is in your existing ADU bylaw, and oops, my battery's starting to run out. Hold on a second. You had a prohibition against an ADU being on a lot with more than one principal dwelling is located. Do we still want to retain that?
Say that again?
Yeah, instead of if you had a 2-family house and you wanted to add an ADU, you can't. Under our current bylaw, it has to be a single family residence.
Yeah.
And I would think, I mean, if you have a multifamily lot, it's already sort of lending itself to an ADU additional option.
That was my take on it, but obviously it was something in the existing bylaw. The other thing just to be aware of is that the new state law does not allow us to restrict an ADU or the principal dwelling unit to be owner occupied. So that has to come out.
Okay.
So I think it sounds like, Tom, everybody wants to go with version 1 rather than version 2, which would entertain more than one ADU and take it as a baby steps, as you say.
Yeah, but put in the
Okay.
special permit for a slightly larger.
Okay.
And I think if there's a multifamily, a 2-family, I think adding an ADU
I would be against that.
might make sense as opposed to limiting it to only single family. I mean, that's mostly what we have here in Cohasset. But
Yeah, I would be against that because then you're getting into the same thing about multiple ADUs. You're gonna have multiple dwellings, and I'm gonna guess in a lot of the cases, a 2-family isn't, to the extent we have any, aren't owner occupied. Maybe they are, but I don't know, the owner, if it is owner occupied, they have flexibility having 2 units to what they can do for their future.
Well, we have that component of our bylaw where you have enough land area, you can add, and your house predates zoning. You could add two, you could make a 2-family, 3-family, 4-family, 5-family. I mean, if you have enough area, like in residence A,
Yeah, I know.
you have to have 18,000 square feet. You can you can make it 2-family as of right if you've got an additional 6,000 square feet of land. But then if you wanted to make it a 3-family, you'd have to have an additional 6,000 square feet of land or 30,000 square feet. And there's no upper limit to the number of multifamilies that you could have. But I think a certain amount of flexibility with this makes sense. And changing it from single family only.
Well, Carolyn drafted, but I would oppose it, but.
Why don't we discuss
You can
it?
you can draft it for everybody to look at, so. All right,
I actually had a question, Tom, if you don't mind.
yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't see it.
Carolyn, in for I think both versions, but specifically version 1 in section G talking about parking, I noted in the state's bylaw that they had the provision that anything within a half-mile radius of train station, bus station, etc.
Yeah.
Should we
Yeah.
be adding in that provision whereas
Yeah,
we have the
that's
MBTA station?
That's a good point. I will do that. Thanks, Cassandra.
Also, just in the talks of the multiple family or multifamily on a lot, during the presentation yesterday that Amy Questle did, a lot of her opinion was that ADUs would not be allowed on any lots that had multifamily or duplexes, anything like that. So
Right.
I think
right.
the current bylaw as it stands would make sense in relation to the new state regulations.
Right. No, because it's supposed to be with a single family residence is allowed.
There you go then. All right, so we'll wrap up for tonight. Let's just go over that we have 1, 2, 3. Are set for the moment. 4, we're just gonna have some brainstorming about some of Birgit's suggestions and how to maybe refine the exemptions, but we're pretty close to finish with that. Carolyn will update this ADU one. Perhaps at our meeting on the 4th, we'll see the mitigation one. If not, the 18th would probably be a necessary deadline for that one.
Yep.
We will discuss FAR and frontage at the next meeting, and you'll see my note in this at the end of this thing about what my thoughts are about low impact development. Low impact development, when you go try to find the model bylaw, it says it can't be found, but you can dig a little bit. It was drafted in 2017 and it really doesn't say much.
MAPC put together.
Yeah, MAPC put
I
together, yeah.
presented that a couple of years ago.
Yeah, they put together, it's mostly tools of like requiring certain things to be built in projects. And I think we can incorporate those principles in a lot of different places in the bylaw. And the Concom may have already done a lot of this with the stormwater regs. I don't know how much of low impact development tools they have incorporated into that yet. But again, what I'm suggesting is we don't need a standalone bylaw on the subject. The residential cluster is really, again, it is somewhat tied to what we do with the frontage, because an increase in frontage would probably lead to a return to more subdivision development in cul-de-sacs, which is, I think, why in the 60s we made the change we did. And again, you'll see in my note on the end of all of these bylaws, just some thoughts about what we can do. I don't think the residential cluster bylaw in the end of the day needs a lot of major revision, if any. Again, the big thing with that right now is it's triggered by a 10-acre development. there's been talk, suggestion, I think Clark, you've suggested a number of times of lowering that to 5 acres, but,
Well, I don't know what the number is, but we don't see a lot of, if we
Yeah,
really
we
want to
don't.
buy a
We-
lot of work, we might want to allow it in residence C and reduce the
yeah,
the overall lot size,
yeah, I am just, so
however that works.
my suggestion, and, I didn't suggest this actually in the note I wrote, but, we'd probably leave this to deal with on the 18th if we deal with it, but give some thought to it, what you might want to see. I do think that if we increase the frontage as I'm proposing, one thing the residential cluster bylaw says, yes, you can do smaller lots because you're giving open space, but you still are limited to the same number of lots that land would
Sure, that's
call
right.
for. What we don't put in there is a density bonus. So if we're going to increase the
We don't do
frontage,
that anywhere.
no, we're going to increase the frontage requirement. We're going to decrease the number of lots that can be built within a given cluster. So perhaps we need to think about the concept of a density bonus if we get certain trade-offs to that, and allowing more lots than otherwise would be built without employing the cluster development tools.
Well, we might want to take a look at the cluster that have been done over the last 10 years, like Toll Brothers, and see how they work that out. I think that they ended up, it's one parcel, but they have like deeded areas for each individual house.
Yeah, but I'm just saying with Toll
And it
Brothers.
doesn't really matter what the frontage is.
Well, with
But
50
it's
lot,
like more
well,
or less a subdivision / cluster.
let's just say, for example, Toll Brothers property with the 50-foot frontage, without using the cluster principles at all, they'd get 20 lots in there. Well, if we increase that to 100 or 75 feet, whatever, and whatever the district is, that's going to decrease the number of lots from 20 to 15, maybe as low as 10. So in order to encourage the cluster tools of getting open space in the development, do we maybe give a density bonus and allow them to have 16 lots instead of 15 lots, or 12 lots instead of 10?
It's an
That's all I'm asking you to think
interesting
about.
idea. I just think we should look at real world examples in our dirt or nearby.
Yeah, all right. Well, let's plan to take that one up on the 18th. Again, it's in my thinking, it's not as much of a priority as I once thought it was, but it may become more of a priority if we all agree to change frontage back to what it used to be. Anyway, so the meeting on the 4th, we will deal with whatever little we have to land alteration, and I'm going to encourage somebody. I mean, I'll circulate this again tonight, and I did a definition of what an attached and a detached garage is, but that's just an idea. Somebody else come up with the ideas. I'm not going to do anything else beyond what I've just written tonight. We're going to deal with this ADU thing and get that finalized. And then we'll jump into FAR frontage and maybe maybe we'll leave the mitigation and the residential cluster to the 18th. That's what we'll do. So in the next meeting on the 4th, we'll just deal with cleaning up land alteration, cleaning up ADUs, frontage, and FARs. Okie dokie. And with that, we have no other business. So,
You want a motion to adjourn?
yes. Carolyn, you're clear on what? we're
Yes.
looking for the
Yes,
floor?
and
Okay.
I will give one last review of the solar and wind, just to make sure everything is captured.
Yeah, Cassandra, can you just make sure in the table of uses for the 3A commercial district, we have wind and solar dealt with?
Yes, I can look into that.
Because if we have to make the change to the table as part of the warrant article, we can do that. Okay, and then Carolyn, separate from that, you saw Woody's other comment.
Remind me the other comment besides.
There's some
Oh, some text.
yeah,
that
some
Paul was
obscure
putting in.
line in the old Article 4 that he thinks got overlooked and got omitted
Yeah.
by mistake. I don't know if it's important or it's important to him, so.
I didn't double check to see whether he was correct. He wasn't sure whether it had been deliberately omitted or maybe he just can't find it in the new version.
Yeah,
I can take a look and see.
if we have to address it to the whole board, we'll address it on the 4th, but right now, it seems to be a minor issue that, all right, so, yes, Clark, a motion to,
Surgeon is not.
who's that?
That's just Deirdre's background noise. Tom, before we adjourn, I realized that you sent everything to Woody. Did you want me to send whatever you circulate either tonight or tomorrow to David, as he's the new chair of the ZBA?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not looking to set up the meetings with the other boards until the end of September. Probably looking to do the public forum. We'll do our hearings, our Section 5 hearings in early October, early mid-October. The end of the month, maybe crank out a public forum because we'll probably be fairly far along. And if the select board do have me on the agenda for Wednesday, I'll just ask them. The other alternative was late September. I'll just meet with them in late September when we're much further along in finishing what we had to show them. I forgot that Tuesday was election day.
I
And then-
believe that I had spoken with Chris, who was looking for an update, and he had said that just a memo would be
Alright,
fine.
yeah, yeah.
So I have one drafted that I was going to update after this evening's meeting. I
Okay.
can send it to you if you'd like to review.
Yeah, just run it by me and we'll do it that way. But Ellen had emailed me the other day and we were setting this up for the 4th, but when I glanced at their agenda tonight, it's not on the agenda. So I'll just confirm with her I'm not coming on the 4th and I'll come later on with them.
Okay.
And then hopefully, we have a light permitting schedule so we can get these other things done, because then we also have to get all the new regulations that we're doing into place. And Carolyn, I'm still looking for your thoughts on, doing the compilation, the single volume compilation of all of our regulations. I don't think there should be any rocket science to it. Each board just does its own and just agrees to put it all in one place. That's all. But
It could just be as simple as that, quite frankly.
yeah, you just tell me otherwise. But all right, so Clark, go ahead, make your motion.
I did.
All right, somebody second.
Second.
All right, thank you. All in favor of adjourning?
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye.
Kevin Heine, aye.
Deirdre Hobson, I.
And Birgit Friedrich, aye.
Great, well, thank you for all being here.
Good night.
Your attention, and circulate more tomorrow.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Good night.
Nice weekend. Bye-bye.